Welcome back, everyone. All right, it is time for our last speaker of the day. Dr. Sean Upshaw is an assistant professor of visual information and persuasion and health communication in the Stan Richards School of Advertising and Public Relations in the Moody College of Communication at the University of Texas, Austin. Dr. Upshaw is a distinguished Edward Alexander Bouchet Scholar with publications in academic journals such as Health Communication, Patient Education and Counseling, and Journalism Studies. Dr. Upshaw's research interest consists of health disparity and communication in the context of visual information and persuasion. The primary focus of Dr. Upshaw's research explores and explicates what, how, why underserved populations in the United States engage with health messages. Currently, Dr. Upshaw is a member of the National Communication Association, International Communication Association, Association for Education in Journalism and Mass Media, and the Association of Medical Illustration. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Upshaw. Looks like your mic is still on mute. There we go.
Thank you so much for having me, and greetings to the participants of the Water Conservation Symposium. Thank you for having me here today, especially to the organizers for extending the opportunity to come and speak with you guys. A topic that I think it'll be very helpful for not only for the enthusiast of water conservation, but just in overall general conversation from the theme I've been hearing from the last two presenters, which did excellent work on just the importance of communication and how well it plays out into public affairs, engagement, and as well as public knowledge, and how water conservation plays such a tremendous part in our daily lives as consumers of water, but as well as being actively acknowledged on the benefits and the responsibilities that come with being a consumer of water. So today I want to talk about just the role of, let me see if I can share the screen here with you. The importance of investment, protection, and support as it relates to water conservation from a social marketing perspective. Let's see if I can do this right quick. Let's see. One of you guys can see share screen. Sorry about that. I'm just getting used to this. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Can you see the presentation that's in front of you? I'm getting used to.
Yes, you're all good, Sean.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So today I just want to talk about I.P.S. and water conservation, a social marketing approach. So when it comes to I.P.S., which I'll explain what that acronym means, it's basically a conversation for social marketing as an approach to at least to appeal to underserved groups, underserved communities that may not be familiar or aware of water conservation or its efforts or initiatives, and how can they be more included and involved. So I want to talk about this in more of an overview. So basically I want to explain what social marketing is, what are some taken for granted assumption questions about water conservation that I think will be very helpful in appealing to underserved communities, and also looking at the role of culture, health messages, and the role of support for water conservation in terms of public policy and public messaging regarding the topic. So what is I.P.S. of water conservation social marketing? Well, this is a coined term I created after doing some research on your organization and your initiative. So I thought of a good way to appeal to underserved communities is by approaching it in this manner: invest, protect, and support. And the acronym mostly focuses on a pathway of connecting your research and initiatives and desired outcomes for water conservation using a social marketing approach. And later I explain what and why I use social marketing as a way to appeal to underserved communities. But basically, I.P.S. is an identifiable approach in appealing to underserved communities. And I'm going to explain a little bit why briefly. So What is social marketing? Basically, in layman's terms, you're using constructive messages to appeal to a particular audience or a general population that involves informing or influencing or swaying public perception for the greater good of society concerning public health. Now, when you think of the term social marketing, many of you may think this has more to do with a commercial approach, but that's not necessarily the case. We're not necessarily looking at selling a commercial property or a commercial identity or product, but rather we're encouraging a fostering of public good or the greater good of society by altering health behaviors that are beneficial for everyone to see by allowing a more of a social approach to topics that may be sensitive, controversial, or just interesting in general. So social marketing research is not new. It's been around for quite some time. It's been mostly featured within the academic and health-centered realm research that mainly looks at altering behaviors, beliefs, or attitudes regarding certain health-related topics. And one of the features of social marketing is identifying objective approaches when constructing messages or studies that involves altering beliefs, knowledge, or behavior. So that's one of the three components of an objective that usually you tend to look at any type of campaigns, whether it's visual or conversational or even just informational. So knowledge, belief, and behavior are some of the common features you tend to find. And using this type of objective approach is evidence-based supported. So given the nature of what we are in today, evidence-based approaches are so essential to not only executing the type of messages you want your audience to receive, but at the same time, what do you want them to be more impacted by? And that's something that I always talk about, the end goal of your campaign. And if it's more knowledge or altering beliefs or encouraging a different behavior, this is one way you can definitely can do that. Or at least this approach is definitely very helpful. So I wanted to introduce these questions to you as a way to help those who are enthusiasts or very knowledgeable experts in water conservation to think about as a way to sort of do a self-reflection on how and why taking for granted assumptions are one of the ways you can appeal to underserved groups, because experience does shape how we see ourselves and the practice we tend to embark upon. So having that self-reflection will help you or your organization or initiatives to be able to appeal to groups who may not necessarily have that same level of experience as you are, but in a way you're able to appeal to them in both logic and as well as humility wise. So I'm not going to dive deep into each question, but I just want to bring this out for your own personal practice. So what resources do you have to inform me about water conservation as you're speaking to yourself? How does water conservation impact my quality of life? Why is water conservation important regarding health? And most importantly, where do I look to learn more about water conservation initiatives and public policies that support water conservation efforts? So we're looking at health, public policy, quality of life, and information. These are identifiable communication channels, or at least communication, I will say, markers for interested groups to be able to appeal to underserved groups. Because if you think about where you get your information from, how does it impact your quality of life? How does it impact your health overall, since we're dealing with the era of COVID-19? And I believe from the previous presenter, he talked about the concern of COVID entering into the water supply. That is definitely something that is going to impact how public relations and marketing and any type of campaigns can help ease that concern regarding that question. And then most importantly, how can you actually encourage underserved groups to get more involved in public policy? Because that's usually one of the key ways in which changes or alterations are important to fit the needs of the growing, changing consumer. Here's one question I kind of want to give to you concerning the investment portion of the presentation is, what role does culture play in recruiting and investing into water conservation? Well, very short here. Uncovering existing beliefs, lived experiences, and perception of water conservation through a series of visuals, mainly just campaigns or commercials, is one way to explore culture's connection to recruitment and investing. So, when I say investing, I'm not necessarily looking at the financial aspect of it. Investment can be interpreted as more as an integration of involvement, and also keeping individuals around that are interested. They want to provide more perspective and pathways to enhance your water conservation initiatives or objectives. And one of the ways of getting people involved is unlocking the role of culture. And when I say culture, I'm using it as a way of identifying audiences within a community. So there are many of cultures within the group. So whether we're looking at gender, education, lifestyle, if we're looking at finances, are we looking at, excuse me, perceptions of reality based on lived experiences. There are multiple ways you can take a look at culture, but basically, you're looking at how an individuals identify themselves and walk or engage in daily life using their own viewpoint as to look at certain topics or experiences. So, undercovering your community cultures is one way that you can provide sort of a bridge to introduce yourself, introduce the initiatives, and how welcoming that perspective can be inclusively for groups who have been traditionally underserved or may not be fully aware of what your initiatives can bring. What role does health play in protecting water conservation efforts? As the previous speakers has mentioned, that health is definitely connected to the water supply that we are often consumers of. And one thing I would definitely share is that the concerns of what goes into our water, the importance of filters, how can I use them, what price does it come with it, what types of recommended filters are presented, and most importantly, how can I, as a person who consumes water, can better appreciate and preserve the quality that we are often afforded to have. And when we're thinking about the underserved communities, this is probably some of the questions that they may have, along with plenty of others as well. So one of the things I would encourage individuals is being open to different perspectives about the role of health and water conservation, because believe it or not, there are probably some different myths, misunderstandings, misconceptions, and often insider knowledge that many water conservation groups may not be fully aware of, but also can incorporate that into their social marketing approach, and also interventions that they feel is necessary to address certain topics or concerns that may be problematic and you might want to capture at the earliest of best. So, what role does support play in terms of public policy, public messaging concerning water conservation? One thing I would definitely point out is that transparency is so important when it comes to public policy and messaging, especially when we are attempting to practice more inclusive ways of involving underserved communities that need to have more of a visible presence and involvement in the conversation, the recognition of challenges or concerns, and then at the same time, the advancement of the initiative that fulfills all of its needs by including everyone that has been traditionally left out or unaware of your initiative. So being transparent on these particular levels helps people to see themselves into the narrative that you are selling, or at least presenting to an audience, that way find themselves being more involved, especially if they see a connection between their quality of life, their use of water, and how well advocates of water conservation play a role in securing the necessary resources and information for people to be more competent on their interaction with water. And one of the areas I will also point out is knowledge gaps. One thing we have to come in mind is that we are individuals on a journey that are learning as much as we are getting. At least we're learning as much as we age, but at the same time, there will always be gaps where topics that may not have never had a chance to surface are essential in, or at least are essential features in planning and executing a successful social marketing campaign, and especially when we're talking about the role of information, how much it is so vital in protecting the safety and the engagement of water altogether. And sharing those informations among underserved communities is one of the ways you can get more people involved in public policy. And of course, many of you may already be aware the importance of public policy as it relates to quality of life, access, taxes, you name it. So looking at that terms, it does play a more, or at least invites a more an inclusive approach for people to get more involved in this process. So that's one other question I want to throw out at you. And then in closing, just keeping within my time frame here, know your audience. And this is where I will say that I'm a newly Texan here. I just relocated here 3 months ago. So I'm still getting to know the Texas community and the Texas Austin, or at least the Texas audience. And one of the things is that you know the language, the culture, and as well as the mindset of the consumers. And just keep in mind that having more data, especially for interviews or focus groups, is one way to know that your audience is always evolving and changing. And understanding how you know your audience is one of the best ways that this approach rather can be a very necessary initiative that can appeal to at least it can appeal to underserved communities going forth. And at the same time, it can provide a more of a prosperous relationship between initiatives and groups that will see themselves being more invested in and more involved. And by listening to the conversations earlier regarding their individuals' first introduction and careers in water conservation is a testament to that others learn from other people's experiences by seeing themselves more involved and finding a place where they can fulfill their own personal or professional initiatives that reflect their passions in preserving water, and also kind of encouraging others to see that same level of investment, support, and protection that is also important. And here's my contact information. I really appreciate the time to present this information to you guys. Hopefully it'll be helpful to some of you, or at least all of you. That would be great as well too. But given the nature of my line of work in health disparities, this is something that is definitely something new to me to present, but I was also up for the challenge, and I really appreciate the organizers for extending this opportunity to be with you today virtually. And if you have any more additional questions, my email address is there, and I look forward to entertaining any questions and my references. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Upshaw, for that wonderful presentation. It looks like we do have a couple minutes for questions, and I do have a question here. First of all, though, did you say that you are newly moved to Texas?
Yes.
All right. Well, welcome from all of us. I'm not sure where you moved from, but
I'm originally from Tennessee, but I finished a postdoc at the University of Utah about a couple of months ago.
Okay.
And I arrived here in Austin in late July.
All right, wonderful. Well, welcome from all of us. Okay. So I've got a couple questions for you. The first is, with everyone being so busy these days, what is an incentive we can offer to get people involved and or get their input?
That is a good question. It also depends on what is in need. And I know for some, a gift card is always great, but also understanding that their involvement, or at least their investment of time, is something that can be determined by the group and the resources they can provide, whether it is having someone to come and take a look at their home in terms of water usage, understanding whether a free filter will help. It varies. So I would say know the type of audience that you're dealing with, potentially see where there's a need, and if you have the resources to provide that, it's something I will definitely encourage a person to, or at least an organization to consider if they have the means to do so. But any type of incentive that helps both the giver and the receiver to maintain a harmonious relationship is always beneficial.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, our next question. Can you provide an example of underserved communities being a part of a public policy change?
That is a good question. I would say that one of the best ways is to highlight how water and health have an interpersonal relationship, or at least an interconnected relationship. So a campaign that speaks to the quality of water and the quality of health for all families is one way people can get involved, and it brings the issue of what is water conservation, how does it help, how does it affect me and my family, and at the same time, how does it impact the community that I'm currently living in, and showing multiple evidence from people who have benefited from water conservation involvement, along with video testimonies or any type of communication outlet that most people tend to prefer to get their resources from, sort of connects the campaign and the voices of people that the audience can identify with. So we have families who are, 3 or 4 within the household, the importance of consumption and also protecting the resources using for water, personal narrative, statements, anything that connects the human experience with the phenomenon is one way you can create a campaign with the objective of providing more information or altering beliefs, or also looking at behaviors such as, not excessive use, but also protecting the resources that are available, and just understanding who are the key players involved in initiatives. So I guess it's a game of who's who mixed with icebreakers, and it's not just a one time only. It's literally a repetitive time. So in other words, letting people get to know you over a period of time and not just a one time only is something I think I would encourage anyone to consider trying as a campaign approach.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and our next question is a popular one. It's been upvoted. So can you recommend specific studies regarding water conservation education in underserved communities?
That is a very good question. I had some time to kind of put this presentation together. So I would say I don't necessarily have one with me at the moment, but I believe the previous presenter, I think his name was Carl Lepper, if I'm his name. Yeah, he had some pretty good visuals on studies that have been used to sort of paint the picture of the significance, and as well as interventions, or at least significance and numbers associated with customer service and water support usage. And I know you can definitely start from there. I do recall seeing a few examples from his presentation, but that just shows me that I should have had that in there as well too. So I was focusing on just the initiative altogether. But I probably would say check definitely Google Scholar. It's usually one good way you can find topics related to water conservation, and science communication or health communication is one way you can use that as a way to kind of gather some existing evidence-based studies that have done in this area.
Perfect, wonderful. So we have time for one last question. Any suggestions on, any suggestions on how to reach out to underserved communities?
One way off the top of my head is meeting them where they are. I guess now, given the nature of COVID, it's like you can't really meet anybody where they are right now. But I guess when this passes, one way is to meet them where their needs are, but also build a relationship with them. Think of these groups as inclusively, but at the same time, understand that they too have similar situations as you. Also understand that they may have similar beliefs or different beliefs about water conservation. You can form a relationship based on that experience alone. And also understand there's going to be some different attitudes and why they think this is important to them or not. And this is one way you can use your information, and as well as consistent relationship building, as a way to sort of pull them in. So in other words, having a positive rapport with someone from a different culture or background is one way you can inclusively bring them in without necessarily saying or identifying yourself as the expert of something or the leader of something. This is something that people can be more passionately involved by not acknowledging the labels that you carry, but rather you and I are drawn from the same source of water. let's talk about ways that you can get yourself involved and just provide some avenues that they can see themselves getting involved, and their relationship does grow over time. So I definitely, that's one way I can recommend, and trust me, there are plenty of ways of going about it, but I think off the top of my head, that's one way you can do it.
Okay, thank you. So we actually do have a little bit more time. We are, you wrapped up a little early, so I was looking at our time. Are you okay answering a couple more questions for us?
Yeah.
All right, they're coming in quick. So, all right, so the next question, can you give an example of a great piece of visual content a public sector organization has used to create impact in underserved communities that you've seen?
That is a really good question. Visually speaking, there are so many avenues people tend to use. It's funny that question asked that is because I am currently teaching an Adobe visual class for those who ever use any type of Adobe related software from InDesign, Illustrator, Photoshop, or Premiere Pro. I tend to learn that those that are using any type of visual information or effects tend to run to websites like Canva to create background work or art, or commission someone to create those designs for them with an information, well, at least with an objective in mind, whether it's altering beliefs, looking at the ways to improve public knowledge, or encouraging a behavior change, or at least a health behavior change, are some of the key avenues people tend to use. And sometimes your local municipalities tend to have visuals that are available for public downloading use. I'll just use COVID for an example. Here in Austin, I know the Austin Public Health has a myriad of visuals that are available to cover topics, whether it's dealing with masks, whether it's dealing with ways to report COVID symptoms, where to go and get resources from, how and why the benefits of testing are so important. So they cover a variety of topics that appeal to the consumers here, and is also using the language and the culture as one of the appeal pieces to sort of draw them in. And I guess removing the image of this is not something that's coming from the outside, but here locally, we Texans take care of each other. So here's one way I can appeal to you, using your language or familiar language, using your particular mindset or familiar mindset, and also showing that this is not just a one side telling you what to do, but I'm also applying those same rules as well, because I have a family or friends or loved ones that I want to protect, and as well as protecting myself. So just to, in shortened terms, definitely check with your local municipalities, mainly those within the governmental sectors of your local area, is one way you can pull information or visuals that are relating to water conservation, just to kind of give you an idea of what is already out there. And also, Google's a good friend too, so try it out.
Google is always a good friend. Thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I'm going to leave a couple questions in the Q&A chat. If you have a moment to respond to those in the general chat section, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much for being here today. And I am going to hand things back over to Dustin to take us into our next activity. Thank you, Dr. Upshaw.